So what does this all mean? Am I advocating that we dismantle our organized crime squads, our gang units, our drug squads, our terrorism task forces? Do we just lump all of our resources together and see what comes of it? Well, the answer is no, not at all. We get an enormous value from developing historical knowledge and subject matter expertise in addressing particular crime problems. Also, our respective legislative bodies often appropriate resources to our agencies with the express intent that we'll apply these resources to address particular crime problems and that we will be held accountable for specific results. What I am saying, though, is that your gang task force had better be talking to your homicide unit. Your terrorism squad should be working closely with your narcotics unit. Your cyber unit should be collaborating with your fraud squad. And those of you in leadership positions should be looking for every opportunity to lower the structural and cultural walls that stand between your own investigators, as well as those standing between you and your outside law enforcement and intelligence agency partners. Experts like you here today say that many of the most prolific organized criminals operating on a global scale are less hierarchical and more fluid than what we've seen in the past. You've learned their illicit networks and criminal collaborators are highly mobile, matrixed, and networked on a global scale. These factors have made our organized criminals that much more prolific and formidable. To succeed against transnational organized crime, we need to play the same agile network game as our adversaries and play it better than they do. This cross-program collaborative approach is becoming more of a reality at Los Angeles FBI than ever before. FBI Los Angeles leads, co-sponsors, or participates in over 30 task forces with other federal, state, and local partners. Today, there are over 240 state, local, and other federal officers enrolled with FBI LA as full or part-time task force officers. But just as importantly, our healthcare fraud is working jointly with our Eurasian Organized Crime Squad. Our cyber squads are working hand-in-hand with our Joint Terrorism Task Force and counterintelligence squads. We have a terrorism threat squad embedded at the Joint Regional Intelligence Center. Our Field Intelligence Group has investigative analysts embedded on virtually every squad, working every violation in our portfolio. This is paying dividends, of course, in the way of force multiplication against identified threats. But more importantly, it's giving us a new prism through which to view old challenges, resulting in promising and innovative investigative approaches not tried before to combat organized crime. So how does this actually work? In LA, we have a squad dedicated to healthcare fraud investigations within our white-collar crime branch. The special agents assigned to this squad have particular expertise in investigating violations of federal fraud statutes intended to deter hundreds of millions of dollars in theft of funds from U.S. government medical entitlement programs such as Medicare and Medicaid. In the past, these cases targeted mostly individuals, such as unscrupulous doctors who fraudulently overbilled government programs for personal financial gain. In recent years, our healthcare fraud investigators began to see widespread and highly organized fraud being committed by criminal elements within large ethnic communities, such as the Armenian immigrant community in LA. Meanwhile, our Eurasian Organized Crime Squad, working within a multi-agency task force, has been addressing long-established and often extremely violent Armenian organized crime groups for many years, investigating crimes such as murder, extortion, kidnapping, and drug trafficking. The Organized Crime Squad and the Healthcare Fraud Squad now recognize that within their respective investigations targeting criminals within the Armenian community, there are many targets of mutual interest. They also learned that sophisticated healthcare fraud schemes have entered into the portfolio of organized gangsters within the Armenian community. So now, these squads meet regularly and confer to share intelligence and deconflict their enforcement operations. They collaborate jointly in conducting informant debriefings and conduct joint interrogations of subjects subsequent to arrests or takedowns of their respective cases. And while the healthcare fraud mission differs from the organized crime investigative agenda, both squads and programs are effectively leveraging their respective expertise, resources, and investigative techniques against the overall crime threat in the Armenian community. Currently, the Los Angeles Eurasian Organized Crime Task Force is conducting a 2-year investigation involving Armenian organized crime that, after 13 months of wiretaps and human source penetration has produced evidence of 4 distinct crime cells with ties to the notorious Los Angeles-based Mexican mafia, committing extortion, healthcare fraud, narcotics trafficking, money laundering, identity theft, and murder. The healthcare fraud squad is investigating the wife of the leader of one of these crime cells. The fraud investigation revealed over $33 million in Medicare fraud directed by the wife. She was not easily implicated in the organized crime task force investigation. The healthcare fraud investigation revealed, however, that she had significant ties to major Armenian organized crime figures in Los Angeles and other large U.S. cities. Through close collaboration, the Eurasian OC Task Force was able to leverage the healthcare fraud squad's successful penetration of their target to significantly enhance their organized crime racketeering case. This coordination included delaying arrests in the healthcare fraud case to allow further intelligence and evidence to be gathered in the organized crime case. Close coordination between the 2 FBI programs was critical in this instance to ensure neither investigation was jeopardized due to the actions of the other program's investigators. Well, here's another example. In 2008, one of the Los Angeles counterintelligence squads was investigating a subject for exporting Department of Commerce-controlled electronic items to the People's Republic of China. These items, defined as dual-use technology, are controlled for export to the PRC for reasons of national security, as the items have both civilian and military application. The counterintelligence squad executed a search warrant on the subject's home and found sensitive export-restricted technology components, namely electronics used in the U.S. Army's most sophisticated battle tanks. But in addition, they found a large volume of counterfeit semiconductors and other high-tech commercial equipment, illegally branded as Cisco Systems, Sony, and Canon products. And while the counterintelligence squad fully recognized the significance of the military technology, they did not know the significance of the counterfeit high-tech equipment that they encountered in the search. Fortunately, counterintelligence investigators thought to reach out for the FBI's Los Angeles Cybercrime Squad, which has extensive experience in counterfeit electronics and intellectual property crime investigations. The squads worked together and were able to determine that the subjects had imported 25 shipments of counterfeit Cisco computer networking components, totaling at least 4,300 pieces of equipment with a retail market value of about $3.3 million. The Cyber Squad have established contacts within the high-tech manufacturing community were critical to the case as they garnered the cooperation of Cisco to perform analysis on the components. Cisco was able to quickly prove that the components were indeed counterfeit, and even that they pose a significant fire hazard that could jeopardize entire computer server farms if they were ever installed. Criminal charges developed by the Cyber Squad turned out to be extremely valuable in the counterintelligence program in neutralizing a national security threat. Now, these are a couple of good examples of how breaking down barriers within the field office has garnered value-added results. Now, within an organization the size of the FBI, these were more or less local or micro solutions taken within the scope of a single field office. But I've also witnessed the impact of counterproductive program stovepipes working at the headquarters or macro level. They manifested themselves as internecine struggles within the FBI fought over ownership of investigative programs and major cases of national impact, which could be worked under the auspices of either of 2 separate headquarters program managers. Sound familiar? We've spent countless hours debating whether a particular case is an organized crime case with a white-collar crime flavor, or is it a white-collar crime case with an organized crime nexus? Is it a terrorism case with hints of counterintelligence issues, or is it a counterintelligence matter with possible ties to terrorism? I was personally involved in some internal battles of this nature while assigned to the FBI Cyber Division in Washington, D.C. At issue was which headquarters program owned our efforts in crimes against children. At the inception of the FBI Cyber Division in 2002, program management responsibility for internet child exploitation and child pornography investigations was removed from the FBI's long-standing and very influential violent crime and major offenders program in our Criminal Investigative Division, or CID, as we call it. And it was placed in the new Cyber Division. Responsibility for child kidnappings and human trafficking of minors for sex remained in CID. Well, it's fairly obvious that our somewhat arbitrary program lines of responsibility weren't of any concern to the bad guy, who might very well traffic in porn on the internet, entice kids for sex over the computer, and then actually abduct a child. Fortunately, in Los Angeles, we recognized early on that in many instances it was nearly impossible to separate these issues on a practical level, despite how our resources were managed or how our successes were measured back at our headquarters. So instead of creating program walls between our violent crime and agents and our cyber agents, we formed the Sexual Assault Felony Enforcement Team, which is a traditional multi-agency task force between the FBI and other state and local agencies that have jurisdiction over child exploitation. But it's also a multidisciplinary team of FBI agents, some from our violent crime program with expertise in child abduction and human trafficking, and others from our cyber program with expertise in sophisticated online undercover operations targeting child predators and organized producers of child pornography. It makes perfect sense, but believe me, it was easier said than done to work through the issues of who these agents would report to, how they would attribute their work and statistical accomplishments vis-a-vis their respective headquarters program managers. Difficult, yes, but somehow we worked it out.